Little bit about the concept of culture as we start things fall apart. So what you're going to do for this mini lesson is you're going to work through these slides. So let me project the slides so I can show you what I want you to think through. So the very first slide just asks you the question, what is culture? And this is an inquiry strand that I really want you to consider. And I want you to think about the definitions of culture on a macro level. So what is big culture? But then also culture on a micro level. So you're going to do an activity that's going to ask you to think about your own individual culture. So we'll talk about that a little bit in just a second, okay? The very first thing I want you to do, I think this video is really helpful actually, is I want you to play the video and watch it, and I want you to think about how do these folks define culture? What does culture mean to them? And how does that connect with either definitions you've had of culture in the past or how you've conceived of it, okay? So the very first thing I want you to do as you think through this inquiry is watch this very short video. And then once you watch the 4-minute video, what I want you to think about is the cultural wheel a little bit. So if you look at this cultural wheel, you can see that it encompasses very traditional pieces of culture. So we think about language as a component of culture. We think about community as a component of culture. We often think about food and drink and arts as components of culture. But sometimes we forget about values that people have. We forget about the knowledge and stories that groups of people share, or sometimes the traditions and rituals, the techniques and skills, etc. So know that when we think about culture, both on a macro level, so a big scale, and then on a micro level, which is your kind of individual culture and the culture you perceive yourself to be a part of, it has all of these components of the cultural wheel. So when you're thinking about your cultural lenses activity, I want you to think about, how do you play a role in your community? What knowledge and stories do people in your culture share? What language do you share or speak? And that includes dialect and family aphorisms and euphemisms and ways that you speak to each other in your communities. Traditions and rituals that are really important, which includes holiday celebrations, birthday traditions, all kinds of things. Techniques and skills that might be valuable in your culture that maybe other people don't find valuable. So maybe there's a hobby that someone has passed down to you, or a skill that's really important. Maybe cooking is really important in your family, so that's something you can think about. Tools and objects that are a part of your culture. So something really simple like we collect trinkets from every vacation we've been on, and those objects are very much a part of the culture of my family. The arts and how people value the arts, and especially music. Music holds lots of cultural significance, and so how is that a part of your cultural wheel? Food and drink obviously is a pretty one that you can explore pretty readily. And then what values are important to your culture? Okay, so this very last one is significant because sometimes we don't even think about the things that are valuable in our culture. And so I'm going to show you the next slide called the cultural iceberg. And I really want you to think about how that connects with what people in your culture or cultures that you're a part of value. Okay, so the iceberg concept of culture is this, and this is a pretty significant concept that was developed from intercultural programs in 2010. This notion that when we think about culture, big C culture, so culture like sort of international culture or global culture, etc. What we often think about are fine arts and literature, drama, music, cooking, dress. These are the things that when we have international festivals like we did last week that we celebrate or that we bring to the forefront. But what we don't think about are all of these aspects of culture that are below our awareness. They're below the waterline on the iceberg. And so how do people in your culture view beauty? What are rules of decency? What are relationships and courtship practices? Concepts of justice, attitudes about what it means to be dependent or independent. That might vary largely in your family. or in certain cultural groups where it's very important to be independent at a very young age. But other cultural groups have multi-generational households where you stay home until you are married, right? Definitions of sanity, or what it means to be sane, the nature of friendship, the concept of self. So think about all of these things that are related to culture that we don't even think about. So for example, in my family, I've talked about this before, but I grew up German and Catholic, and so concepts of time were very, very important in my cultural upbringing. And so it was very, very important to be on time and or to be early. That showed that you valued the people's time that were hosting you. So that's one thing that's not about the top of the waterline, but on top of the iceberg, but very much below the iceberg. So as you're filling out your lenses activity, I really want you to think about not only the things at the top, but also the things that are underneath the iceberg that are a part of your culture, okay? So you're going to do this activity called cultural lenses. So it's going to look a little bit like this, but let me take you to Canvas so you can see what I want you to do. So when you open it up on Canvas, you're going to see that same set of glasses. And on the left lens, you're going to document some very specific things about your cultural identity. And then on the right lens, you're going to document other things. So if you go into the module and you go to your cultural lenses activity in Unit 3's module for Things Fall Apart, what you'll see is, again, this set of glasses. So you're going to click on it and you're going to open it up. And you can either print this out, guys, and do it on paper, or you can do it digitally by just adding some text boxes, whatever's easier for you. So there is a PDF, and then there is the Google Doc that you can click on if you need to for sharing. So what you're going to do once it opens is on the left lens, you're going to think about, I have no idea why it just did that. Let's refresh so that we can see it. So on the left lens, you're going to think about identity groups that you are a part of. And so you're going to consider what are things that mark who you are regardless of any intervention on your part. So this could be that it could be your sex assigned at birth or your gender identity, your religious affiliation, your role in your family, the number of siblings you have, etc. So things over here, your race or socioeconomic status, things over here that you were sort of born into. And then over here, you're going to list things and experiences, people and places that have impacted who you are that are significant. However, they are not... they are things, experiences that you've had or people that you've met along the way, okay? So as you do this activity, I really want you to think about, again, if we go back to that cultural iceberg, like what's above the surface and what's below the surface, because that'll help you identify what you want to put on your cultural lenses, okay? So this is just one aspect of what I want you to do for today. In addition, I want you to scan the slides about appropriate annotation and how to annotate well. I think that'll serve you well as we're reading Things Fall Apart. You're going to read the first chapter of Things Fall Apart, and then obviously if you haven't already, you're going to go back and take those Cornell notes over the classic archetype of the tragic hero. So make sure that you take really good notes about these sort of elements and characteristics of the tragic hero. All right. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email. Otherwise, you can just touch base with me when I see you next week. Thanks, guys.